I'd be willing to bet that a lot of you have hung on just a little too long after getting caught in a toe hold or an ankle lock. And if you got injured, some of the initial thoughts are usually, can I still train? And what can I do to help my ankle pain? Today we're going to talk all things ankle injury and strengthening. If you're dealing with an injury, this video will give you an idea of how to figure out what was injured, determine how badly it was injured, give you exercises to help you heal, and then guidelines on when to return to training. Alright, so there are a couple of structures that are usually injured when it comes to ankle locks and toe holds. And the first is a ligament. Now, if you were rolling and you felt a small tweak or maybe heard a little pop on the outside of your ankle after a toe hold, the ligament that's under the most pressure is located here, and it's called the anterior talofibular ligament, or the ATFL. It connects the two bones, the fibula and the talus. And the toe hold is a submission that aims to separate these two bones and put that ligament on maximal tension. On the other hand, if you were in an ankle lock and felt a tweak on the top of the ankle where most people feel the ankle locks, you're most likely feeling a muscular or tendinous structure rather than a ligament. Now, the two main musculotendinous structures that cross the front of the ankle are the tibialis anterior and the extensor digitorum longus. Since both start below the knee and cross the front of the ankle, both of these structures would be the target of an ankle lock. Particularly the extensor digitorum longus if your technique is on point and you get a good bite on the toes. So now you should be able to figure out if you've got maybe a ligament injury or a musculotendinous injury. But now let's talk about how you determine the severity of those injuries. For ligaments, we break them down into three categories. A grade 1 ligament sprain involves small amounts of trauma. There will likely be minimal swelling, tenderness that subsides within a few days, and no lingering feelings of instability. Now, grade 2 is a little bit more serious. It's a partial tear of the ligament with notable tenderness, maybe a slight pop heard, inflammation initially that may lead to some prolonged swelling for up to a week or two, and very minimal, if any, lingering instability. Grade 3 is a full rupture of the ligament. Most of the time there's going to be an audible pop followed with a lot of tenderness and swelling over the affected area, and there's a very high likelihood of lingering feelings of instability. Now, if this was really bad and you were unable to put weight down on the injured foot immediately or even shortly after, it's best to get an x-ray to rule out a fracture. Musculotendinous strains are a little bit harder to categorize, but you're mainly going to go off of what you feel in your symptoms. If you're only feeling a little bit of pain whenever you use the muscles or whenever you push down and put the muscles on stretch, then you're probably dealing with a pretty mild injury. But if you're unable to even lift your foot or your toes after those muscles and tendons have been put on stretch, you're definitely dealing with a more severe strain, and rehab is going to take a little bit longer. So now that you have a little bit of an idea of what structure may be injured and maybe to even what degree, let's talk about exercises to help you heal. Now, this is going to depend largely on the degree of injury, but we're going to go step by step, easiest exercises to hardest, and even give you some milestones to hit before you know that you can advance to the next progression. Now, you're going to start with restoring range of motion and doing exercises that we call isometric holds. Gently moving your ankle in circles as tolerated through its full range of motion is a great non-threatening way to make sure your ankle doesn't stiffen up through the healing process. I'm talking you can do this all day, like literally almost 1,000 times a day. You want to make sure that that joint is being lubricated and that blood is constantly being flowed in and out of that ankle. Movement is key here. Now, while you work on these ankle circles early and often, you can start to do the isometrics. This involves the muscle producing force without actually lengthening. Now, these are perfect for making sure that we keep the muscles that surround the area around the ligament loaded while keeping the pain at bay. Some directions will likely be more difficult than others based off of where your pain is located. Now, as these exercises scroll through, notice that the ankle isn't moving, but that the pressure is still being constantly applied. Start with low effort and build your way up until you can do 3 rounds of 30-second holds at about a 75% effort in each direction without your pain exceeding a 2 to 3 out of 10. The next progression is isotonics. Now, unlike isometrics, isotonics involves the muscle lengthening and shortening while producing force. While these scroll through, watch as the ankle moves slowly through its full range of motion without any movement from the knee. If your pain exceeds a 2 to 3 out of 10 going into any direction, only go as far as the joint will let you go. And as you heal, you'll eventually be able to move through each motion through the full range against resistance. Bands are going to differ in resistance, but once you can do 2 to 3 sets of each of these exercises through the full range of motion in your ankle with less than 2 to 3 out of 10 pain, then you're going to be ready to progress to the next level. The next progression is balance and proprioception. Now, when our feet are planted on the ground, it requires a different type of motor programming and timing than whenever you're using the bands. Our ankles need to be stable when they're planted on the ground as well, in order to handle the demands of grappling. So as these exercises roll through, notice how my ankle is working really hard to maintain the various positions on stable and unstable surfaces, and eventually advancing into dynamic leg movements. So once you can do the last exercise for 3 rounds of 30 seconds, you'll be ready to progress. Finally, we have plyometric movements. This puts the most demand on the ankle, and it also requires the most force production while maintaining stability. Once you can do side-to-side bounding for about 15 to 20 seconds without having to touch down the other foot for stability, you've reached the point where most people would finish up their rehab, and you probably don't feel much pain while rolling anymore. Alright, so now let's get into when you can return to rolling during all this. And again, it's going to depend on the symptoms and the severity of your injury. If you take a look at this graph, you can see the different healing times associated with different grades of ligament tears. Grade 1 you can see anywhere from 0 to 14 days. Grade 2 can be anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 months. And grade 3, if you decide not to have reconstructive surgery, 5 weeks to 6 months, and in severe cases up to a year. Now those grades of injuries are obviously not that cut and dry. Most of you will probably be somewhere in between those grades when it comes to injuries, so you should be using your pain and symptoms as your main guide. I would recommend returning to rolling in the early/middle stages of healing, right after you've finished the isotonic progressions. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I'll see you next time.